Hello, everyone, and welcome to another VES-Artex Academy webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today we are joined by Dr. Huw McConochie of Zinpro, and we're really looking forward to his presentation today. Before Huw gets started, just one housekeeping item. We will be taking questions throughout the presentation. You can type them into the Q&A box, which is on the bottom panel of your screen. Throughout the presentation, and then we will address them at the very end. And with that, Huw, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Annie. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for the invitation to come and give you this presentation this evening. So my name is Huw McConochie. I'm based in the UK. I work for Zinpro. But I travel globally, visiting dairies and trying to help promote good health and performance of those dairy cows that I visit. Just go on the next slide. Okay, so I'm going to start the presentation with a brief question, and quite simply, my question is: can your dairy produce 100-ton cows? I think this is going to be a major challenge for us going forward in the future, to have longer lived cows which give more lactations. And I know at certain times there are certain economic situations which may warrant or be beneficial to turn cows over faster. But I think from an ethical and welfare and sustainable perspective, I think we really need to focus on keeping cows, healthy cows, productive cows for longer. So I think if you're not currently achieving a good lactation length in your herd, then we need to do something different, okay? And I think if we're not achieving those extra lactations per cow, then we need to really look at what we're doing and stop doing the same thing, and maybe do something different and look at what we're doing and try and extend the number of lactations per cow. Okay, so there's that famous quote that insanity is doing the same thing over and over and again, expecting different results. If we want a different result, then we need to do something different. Okay, so I look at dairy cows and I think of design and function. Okay, so what we expect the dairy cow to do, or how we expect it to cope with its environment, is not the environment that it was designed to persist in. If you think the cow was designed to walk on grass, it was designed to sleep in wide open spaces on pastures, and the environment we put that cow in is completely different to what she was designed to do. And for me, it's a bit like, And for me, it's a bit like trying to get a square peg into a round hole, okay? And as you know, it's very difficult to get that square peg into that round hole. And in order to do that, obviously, we need to change the way we do things in order for that cow to be more successful in the environment that we place her. And of course, when we do try to get that square peg into the round hole, okay, things go wrong. And one of the things, of course, that goes wrong is we begin to break cows. And of course, breaking cows has, severe economic consequences. And of course, that's going to reduce the number of lactations we can get from these dairy cows. So if we look at the reasons why cows are removed from the dairy, you can see there's a number of the reasons which are the most significant. And those are going to be reproduction, they're going to be lameness, it's going to be mastitis, it's going to be low production levels. And you can see there that the lameness is one of the most important ones. But I think if you look at low production and if you look at reproduction, then you'll probably find that actually they're very closely linked as well to lameness. Okay, so if the cows are lame, they're going to lose excessive body condition, they're not going to get pregnant. They're going to not produce the levels of milk that they should produce, and therefore a lot of the reasons why cows leave the herd is going to be related at its core to lameness. So lameness is something we really need to address, and we need to create an environment which will reduce the number of lame cows. I know it's true to say we are getting better at this, right? You know, levels of lameness are getting lower on dairies as we see better management. But I still think there's scope there to reduce it further, and we can do that through creating the correct environment for those animals. Okay, so yeah, you can get a square peg into a round hole, okay, but it's a bit of a compromise because obviously the peg is going to be smaller than the hole, and I try to think of this as lost opportunity. Okay, there's so much genetic potential in these cows. If you look at the distribution of lactation yields in the dairy herd in the US, for example, you can see that the highest performing cow is producing around 35 plus 1,000 kilograms of milk. So genetics is not a bottleneck, but achieving that genetic potential is probably down to the environment, and the environment is probably the biggest bottleneck, because we're not getting these cows to last long enough in their lifetime to produce these high lactation averages. Okay, so if we want to make this square peg fit better into the round hole, okay, we need to round the edges. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight in this presentation. We're going to look at how we can round the edges of that square peg and get things to fit better, get the cow to fit better, or get the environment to fit the cow better, and make her last longer. Okay, so first question is really is how early in life do we need to consider ways in which we can improve the health of the hooves? Okay, and historically we've always just focused on the cow or the first lactation animal when she's calved. That's when we start to take more of an interest in hoof health in these animals. But I think we really need to go right back to the beginning, because probably part of the issue with the health of the hoofs can be related to the way we managed animals in early life, and again, the environment in which we keep those animals. Okay, and I think a nice example of that, of course, is something that we see growing in prevalence in dairy herds, is that medial claw rotation or corkscrew claw syndrome. And again, this is something that we see in younger animals, which tends to suggest that there's something in the environment which is causing this disturbance in the growth of the horn, this abnormality, which is going to have long-term consequences for the health of the animal, its claws, and for its longevity within the herd. Okay, so one very interesting thing, obviously, about this corkscrew claw syndrome or medial claw rotation is that if you remove the pedal bone post-mortem from these animals, you'll actually see that there's some abnormality in that bone. Okay, so you can see the image on the right-hand side here. We have this development of what we call these osteophytes. So this is calcification of the bone, abnormal growth on that bone. And the important thing here, of course, is that's going to be a condition which is going to be irreversible. Okay, so when this happens to an animal, you can be fairly sure that this animal is going to be destined for a lifetime of lameness events. Okay, which is going to seriously impact its longevity within the herd. Okay, and I think it's a good time now just to talk about bone development in these young animals. Okay, and in the beef industry, they actually use a method to determine the age of the animal, which is based on the degree of calcification or ossification of the bone. Okay, so when animals or young ruminants are born, there's a very low degree of what we call calcification of the bone. Okay, and over time, the bone obviously calcifies, it ossifies, and it becomes harder. Okay, and I just put this table up on the right-hand side here because this is the method they use for looking at the bones and aging the animals in the slaughterhouse, okay? And what I want to draw your attention to is that complete ossification of the bone or hardening of the bone doesn't occur in these animals until 42 months, okay? Which means that up until that point, the bone is still in a phase of development, which means it can be influenced by the environment in which that animal is reared, okay? And if you think at between 20 and 24 months, these animals will be coming into the dairy herd and facing the same challenges as the adult cows, which already have this fully developed bone structures. And on that same theme, I just want to put a little bit of context around that, okay? So bone has basically got three conditions, if you like. Okay, so we have this type of bone early in life, which tends to be very elastic, okay? And what that means is if this bone is traumatized in a slight way, then the bone will revert back to its original form, okay? And then we have this next stage, which is called the plastic phase of bone. And at the plastic phase, if you actually cause repeated trauma to these to bones, in this state, they tend to, or they can create an abnormal situation or physiology within the bone, okay? And I think what we see in young animals which are put in these traumatic environments, that we do get these changes in the formation and physiology of the bone. And if you don't believe me that these animals do experience these traumatic episodes, and these episodes can be repeated, this is a nice picture that somebody sent me. I think it was actually Dr. Wolf, I think, sent it to me. But it was of some young heifers in lockups, and you can see how those animals are reaching for the feed. And you can see that the pressure which is being put on the rear legs from pushing against the headlock in order to reach the feed. So just remember that the bone condition of these animals is going to be in that elastic plastic phase. So it's going to be very prone to developing abnormalities if it's put in this type of environment. Okay. So if we want to prevent this early life damage of physiology of the animal happening, then we need to consider the environment in which we keep these young animals. And actually, Nigel Cook looked a lot at this problem, and his basic conclusion is you can't treat young animals the same way as you treat adult cows. Okay, so they need to be in an environment which is less traumatic for them. And if you do that, then you can reduce, in this example, the incidence of these medial claw rotations. So I've just listed there some of the risks that have been identified as possible causes of these medial claw rotations. And I put on the other side in green, obviously, the remedies, which are probably the opposite of the risks, of course. So just to run through those, so putting heifers in free stalls is a risk. So we should be looking to keep those animals on bedded packs for as long as possible. But of course, we do need to bear in mind that we need to train these animals to lie in stalls. So there's a bit of a challenge there. The type of bedding is important because young animals kept on coarse recycled sand, for example, are more at risk of developing these medial claw rotations. And then factors associated with feeding. So the type of feed bunk, the amount of feed that's in front of the animals on a daily basis, how that feed is kept up in front of the animals. All these things have been shown to influence the prevalence of these medial claw rotations. And then on the nutrition side, energy has been shown to be a key requirement more than protein for the development of bone. So obviously, maximizing dry matter intake and quality of feeds is critical in the young rearing stage. And of course, from my perspective, zinc and copper and manganese are trace minerals which are very important for the development of bone and for horn, of course. Okay, so moving on to the adult animals, cows weren't designed to stand on concrete, and we all know this, and concrete is only put in our barns because it makes the environment easier to manage from our perspective, okay? But the problem with the concrete is that it's such a non-forgiving surface. And I've just put this diagram on the right here where we have obviously the hoof, and we have the weight of the animal bearing down. We have this non-forgiving surface which doesn't absorb any weight. And then trapped in the middle, of course, we have this sensitive tissue between the pedal bone and the sole, which of course is the corium. And the corium is there to grow the new tissue. So the health of that corium is critical to producing healthy horn. So for animals on concrete, I like to say that, it's like being between a rock and a bear, okay? It's not the best place to be, which is why it's so important that the cows have adequate rest during the day and to get these animals off concrete. Okay, so this is some work that was done by the guys in Sweden, and they were looking at how the relationship between the claw and the substrate the cow was standing on changed, okay? And what they're looking at is the point of the center of gravity. So I'll just start from the bottom, obviously, because pasture is probably the most natural environment for the cow. And you can see as the surface gets harder, you can see how the center of gravity actually moves towards the back of the claw. And the significance of that, of course, is as the center of gravity moves towards the back, this is going to be the area where we see the sole ulcers occurring. Okay, so on a hard surface, there's more weight being applied in the sole ulcer region, and therefore the risk of sole ulcers occurring on non-forgiving surfaces is going to be a lot higher. And again, so the softer the surface, the center of gravity is moving towards the front of the toe, and this obviously takes the weight off that sole ulcer region, but it also uses the very strong attachment that is there between the pedal bone and the claw capsule, and this is better designed to carry the weight or transfer the weight of the cow into the claw capsule. I just did this short video here just to show really how weight is dissipated. So this was walking on the beach just by my house, and it's just after the tide has gone out and there's still some water remaining in the sand. But you can see when my foot comes down on the sand how the weight is dissipated away from the foot and into the surrounding surface. And of course, if you think of concrete, this is something that's not going to happen. Okay, so when we say that the corium is between the rock and the bear, that's probably a very true statement. Okay, so just going a little bit further on with the work those guys did in Sweden, and what they did was they divided the rear hoof into quadrants. Okay, so you can see the quadrants on the left hand side here. So this outside lateral rear quadrant would be probably the highest risk for your sole ulcers. And you can see again as the substrate gets softer, you can see how the weight is better distributed between those four quadrants. So you can see again on concrete, then the distribution of weight is going to be heavily focused on that sole ulcer region. But of course, the thing is, we can't change concrete. We've got concrete, so we have to change the environment or the management in some way just to make sure we keep those cows off the concrete for as long as possible. And of course, one of the most important and effective management solutions, of course, is hoof trimming on a regular basis. And you can see here we're creating that deep model on the hind quadrant of the lateral claw, so the sole ulcer region. And this is going to help to dissipate or remove some of that excessive weight which is applied in this region with cows on concrete. And of course, creating this good balance between the medial and lateral claw is also going to help with weight distribution. And then of course there's management around the time budget of the cows. So obviously comfortable stalls is going to be a very important factor. And also the time we spend with cows out of the stall or without access to the stall. So for example, reducing milking times, reducing times cows are in lockups, and making sure feed is always available so cows can eat food quickly and get back to the stall to rest. One of the points which is quite contentious at the moment is whether we should have rubber in alleyways, okay? And if you talk to a lot of people, they'll say, no, there should be no rubber in these alleyways. But I'm sort of like sitting on the fence with this at the moment, because I'm thinking, well, this is the place where cows spend the second longest amount of time, okay? And I think provided we have, good comfortable stalls with good heat abatement, then I don't see why it can be problematic to have rubber in this area, because I think this can help to remove some of that excessive weight that's applied on those hind quadrants of the rear claws. So I think it's certainly something to consider, and I think it's something which can be beneficial to the health of the claws. Okay, so the next one I want to look at is the aggressive walking surfaces. So we've looked at the substrate and how hard it is. Next thing to look at is the uniformity of the surface the cows walk on. And I've just put this picture up here because this is a very extreme case, but it's a real life case, and we actually saw it, or my colleague Arturo actually saw this on a dairy. And this can cause severe problems, okay? This is going to be an environment which is going to cause a lot of white line lesions. And part of the problem here, of course, is that it creates focal points of pressure on the claw, because what we're not doing is we're not distributing weight evenly around the claws. And the other thing, of course, is the uneven surface creates a lot of trauma for those claws. And it's going to cause a lot of inflammation and potential problems associated with that. Okay, so I think this is just a nice graphical illustration of that problem. So basically all it's shown is that when cows stand on uneven surfaces, you can see these areas of high intensity of pressure, or focal points of pressure. And you can see how this irradiates up the claw into the bone, into the soft tissue. So you can just imagine that animals that are put into this kind of environment, it is going to not just affect the health of the horn, but also the underlying soft tissues and also the bone as well. And again, we've talked about the effect of traumatic experiences on the bone and how this can influence its physiology, especially at an early age. So what's really important, of course, then is that we have the correct type of grooving for those cows to walk on in order to reduce that risk of trauma occurring as the animals move around the barns and to the milking center. And of course, moving to the milking center, where cows are moving long distances, there's definitely a place for rubber in those situations, especially where we have the combination of maybe sand and concrete. Maybe rubber and sand is going to be less abrasive for those animals. And of course, it's going to facilitate a better flow of animals between milking center and barn, for example. So there is benefits definitely for rubber in those situations, and this will help to reduce trauma on the claw. Okay, so stalls is a big one, and you know I suppose the point to start is, you know, how does the cow lie on pasture, and you know, how easy is it for that cow to maneuver herself and get up and down when she's lying in a pasture compared to when she's lying in a stall. And I like this picture here because this shows just exactly what cows do like to do. Okay, they like to put that leg forward quite often, and sometimes they alternate between legs. And I put this picture here that I took in Greece, and this was a free stall setup. And you can, if you look at this brisket locator in front of the stalls, you can see just how aggressive that is, and that's really going to affect the normal behavior of the cow lying in that stall. And one of the points I always make to farmers is and dairymen is we need to think that the cows do these things multiple times a day. Okay, it's not like us. We do something which hurts us or is traumatic, and we don't do it again. Okay. And cows are a little bit like this, but you know, the desire to lie down is or the motivation to lie down is very great, and they will lie down in environments which are not beneficial to their health. Okay, and they do this over and over, maybe 10, 12 times a day, and over time this is going to accumulate trauma to tissues, to bone, and this is going to affect their long-term health and longevity within the herd. This is just a video I took on a dairy in the UK, and this was on a mattress system, but there wasn't much lunging space in front of the cow, so the cow is already actually lying with a head against the wall. But I just want to focus on the back foot as she gets up, and if you just watch the video, you can see how that toe is pushed into the substrate, okay? And although that is the natural way the cow gets up, in a soft environment, that toe is allowed to sink into the substrate, which gives it more support. But when they're on hard beds, such as hard mattresses or some other kind of bedding material, then the weight again isn't dissipated away from the focal point, okay? So if you remember the foot in the sand, the weight dissipates through the sand, which we could see by the water moving away from under the foot. But on a hard substrate, again, all the weight is focused on the toe of that cow as she gets up. And again, it's been done 10, 12 times a day. And eventually this is going to cause some kind of trauma. And of course, the other thing to remember is that, you know, cows are going to be more susceptible to hoof damage during the transition period. Okay, so the risk of transition cows in uncomfortable stalls is the risk of becoming lame is going to be so much higher in those situations. So substrate is critical and design of the stall. And here I've just borrowed these pictures from University of Wisconsin, but you know, this is the ideal situation, and we can see how easy those cows get up when they have a brisket board which is not intrusive. They don't have any anything blocking the bob zone or the lunge space, so they're able to get up quite easily. And as they get up, those claws sink into the sand, and the weight is dissipated away from that focal point of the toe. Okay, so this is going to have a big or a very large positive effect on the longevity of these cows. Okay, so the next one I want to talk about, I'm just going to check the time, is the feed bunk compared to the grazing. Okay, and again, let me just mute this. So I just wanted to consider for a moment what's natural in terms of eating behavior. Okay, so you can see the cow moves along the pasture. Her head goes from side to side as she harvests the grass. And the legs, you can see they're in a position, they're never straight together, they're always staggered. And one thing about the staggering of the legs, of course, is that the body of the animal actually comes down slightly lower, which allows them to harvest the grass much easier. And again, we're on a soft substrate, so when the cow is moving forward, that toe on the hind feet is actually sinking into the substrate and relieving and moving that center of gravity towards the front of the toe, okay? So if we take the environment in the indoors, it's very different, okay? So again, this is a video. I'm just gonna mute it. But the point I want to make here is if you look at that that lockup, that section of lockup, and you can see how much it's flexing under the weight of a single cow, okay? And I think this is probably about 5 or 6 meters span. But you can see how easily it flexes with that cow. And if you look right at the beginning of the movie, if we just go back, look at those 2 legs together, you can see how she's pushing from the hind legs. And the important point is here, as she's pushing onto a hard substrate, actually it's very difficult for that center of gravity to move forward because the toe cannot sink into the substrate she's on, okay? So what it's doing is it's putting a lot of stress on the tendons, which run down the back of the legs and actually connect with the back of the pedal bone. And we'll talk a little bit about this right at the end of the presentation. And then on the right-hand side, I just want to draw your attention to the positioning of these legs. So like we saw the cow grazing, she always grazes with the legs slightly diagonal or staggered. And cows standing against a feed bunk, they stand with both legs together, which means they're higher up to begin with. And then we do stupid things like putting this step along the feed bunk, which raises the cow up even further, okay? And I just want to draw some arrows on here just for you to think about how the weight is being moved through this animal as she's standing at the feed bunk, if it works. So we've got elevated front feet, okay, which means the cow has to push forward in order to get to the feed in the bunk. Okay, and as she pushes forward, these tendons obviously are being stretched down the back of the leg. And this is also causing stress on this tendon, this deep flexor tendon, which connects to the back of the pedal bone. Okay, so this orientation of the animal, or this stance of the animal, is actually very aggressive for these animals as they're eating, okay, because it's so far away from that natural position that they take up when they're grazing. Okay, so we need to consider the design of the feed bunk when we're building our barns and trying to promote positive hoof health. And again, if you come back to my point about the rubber, what this toe wants to do in this position is it wants to sink into the substrate. On concrete, it can't sink at all. And maybe on rubber, again, there may be some benefit allowing the toe to sink and the center of gravity to move forwards towards the toe, okay? Okay, so obviously with feed bunk, correct dimensions are critical. And the other thing to consider is, the design of the feed bunk. Are we too conservative with what we apply in our dairy barns? Are there alternatives which may make the eating position more comfortable? And are there ways in which we can prevent these animals from always pushing for feed? Okay, because animals obviously nose the feed out, and as they nose the feed out, then it encourages them to push more into the feed bunk. And this is a dairy managed by a Danish guy in Ukraine, and he put in all feed troughs for that very reason, because he said, when I have feed troughs, the food is always in front of the cow in the bunk, and I don't need to push it up, so I'm not disturbing the natural behavior. But those cows don't have to reach for the feed as much as they do if the feed is just left on the floor. Okay, so maybe there's some things to consider there of how we can influence the health of the hoof through the design of the feed barrier. Okay, so the next one and the final one on behavior, or the penultimate one on behavior and what's normal for the cow is the period of parturition. Okay, so cows in the natural environment, they always like to move away from their herd mates when they're giving birth. And there's a lot of work being done which show that those cows which are given a quiet place to calve, and it can be something as simple as in this photo here. It's just an area where they can hide in the group pen. These animals actually give birth quicker, and as a consequence, they probably have less retained placentas and probably less issues around calving. And of course, if we have less issues around calving, then there's going to be a benefit to the health during the transition period or the fresh period, and this is going to help the cows to perform better during lactation. Okay, so I just want to bring in at this point this concept that lameness is actually a transition disease, and part of this again reverts back to this idea of reducing stress around the point of calving. And what I'm showing you here is a locomotion score of a herd that's done 5 weeks before calving, and then all the animals are locomotion scored during the fresh period. And for those who don't know locomotion scoring, 1 is obviously a cow with no problems at all. 5 is a cow which is severely lame. Okay, and the point I want to make here, if you look at the scores, you can see how they change as the cows go through the transition period. So just the process of calving is actually quite traumatic for the claw. Okay, and we think a lot of that is to do with inflammation. And if we can reduce stress round about the point of calving, and if part of that is just by providing animals with a quiet place to calve, maybe this can influence hoof health as well. But you can see here, when we move to the early fresh period, how the numbers of 3, 4, and 5 scores cows actually increases. Okay, so and this is just as a consequence of these cows going through the transition period. Okay, so I just want to bring in that idea of inflammation, okay, because obviously the likes of Lance and Barry and Bradford and all these guys have done a lot of work on inflammation, and I've put together this little model in order to try and explain where inflammation is involved in causing transition diseases and lameness. So I'll just quickly, if we've got time, I'll just quickly run through this cartoon for you, and hopefully then you'll get the idea of where I'm coming from. So on the vertical axis, what we've got is the degree of inflammation, and then along the bottom we've got a time period running from dry calving and into lactation. And the important thing to consider here, of course, is that inflammation is a normal part of transition, and it's required for the repair of tissues, for the expulsion of the placenta, and it's actually associated with the mobilization of both fat and protein as well from the body to support the energetic requirements of the dairy cow in early lactation. The problem is, of course, when we have insults around the point of parturition and into early lactation, and what these will do is actually increase the level of inflammation in the body, okay? And it's this elevated inflammation, so outside the normal level of inflammation, which probably opens up that pathway to causing transition diseases and other problems around about early lactation. Okay, so we can just follow this through. When we have excessive inflammation, requires glucose, more adipose tissue fat is mobilized in order to meet this increased demand for inflammation, for energy. We have problems with the liver, problems with the energy production pathways within the body, and then eventually we get this immunosuppression, which can of course lead to transition diseases. And other issues, of course, we have around the point of calving and also associated with things like heat stress is compromised epithelium in the gut. And then we have other tissues which have compromised epithelium, of course. If you think of metritis, if you think of mastitis, this is all damage being caused to epithelium. And the issue with that, of course, is when we have damaged epithelium, then we have a leakage of toxins into the circulation. And what we know is when we have these elevated levels of toxins in circulation, we get drop in blood calcium, hypocalcemia again, which is immunosuppressive. And again, the end result is that we have this increase in transition diseases. But on top of that, this can also be seen as a cause of other conditions as well. So, for example, circulating toxins in the body can increase the risk of lameness, and changes in energy availability and excessive inflammation can actually affect things like blood flow to the claws. It can affect the formation of the horn. And of course, excessive mobilization of body fat can cause thinning of that digital cushion, which I showed you earlier, which is located between the corium and the pedal bone. Okay, so inflammation can play a role in lameness, and therefore we need to think about how we manage cows around transition. And if we have a good transition protocols and a healthy transition process, then we're not just going to reduce transition cow diseases, but more than likely as well, we're going to reduce the incidence of lameness as well. Okay, so heat stress, again, just in the natural environment, cows are quite able to cope with the heat or have mechanisms of coping with at least some part of the heat. So this is a video that I took on a grazing herd 2 years ago. I think the temperature was about 26, 27 degrees. But you can see how those cows gravitate towards the shade, and obviously they graze and then they go and get to the shade, and that's where they spend most of their time. And from a hoof health perspective for cows indoors, this is critical, of course, because what we know is if you look at the relationship between body temperature, which is here in blue, and the behavior of the cows in terms of lying down or standing up, as temperature rises, we know that cows are going to stand up. And again, standing on concrete is probably the worst things that can happen to the cow in terms of the health of the claws. And if you throw into the whole mix, if you say, well, during heat stress, the risk of having this leaky gut and movement of toxins into the circulation is higher. And then we've got cows which are standing on their feet for too long, they're not lying for long enough, then there's going to be higher risk of these animals developing hoof lesions and becoming lame. So I just put this image up here just to really reiterate the importance of comfort. And here you can see we've got a nice combination. So we've got comfortable stalls, and we've got good ventilation, good cooling, and as a consequence, the cows are lying down. And this is going to be so advantageous to hoof health. Okay, so we talked a little bit about, and this is where I'm just going to finish off really. So we talked a little bit about the center of gravity of the claw, depending on the surface. Okay, so we said that when the substrate is soft, then the toe is able to sink, and the center of gravity moves to the front. And it's positive that the center of gravity moves to the front, because this is where the strongest attachment is between the pedal bone and the claw capsule. And on harder surfaces, the center of gravity moves to the back, and this is where that point is here, where we get this high risk of sole ulcers. Okay, and the other thing also to consider as well is we've got these tendons which run down the back of the leg, the deep flexor tendon, which connects to the pedal bone. And the significance of this is, again, if you think of animals standing on hard surfaces or on soft surfaces, on a hard surface, the toe isn't able to sink, and the back of the claw is taking all the weight. So we're getting stretching, or we're getting interaction, aggressive interaction between the tendon and the pedal bone. And we know from humans that where we have these aggressive or traumatic relationships between tendons and bones, we actually get something which is called bone spurring. And bone spurring is very, very similar to what happens to those pedal bones in those heifers, which have the rotation of the medial claw. Okay, so again, cows which are in an environment where they're standing up a lot on hard surfaces, I guess there's going to be a lot of traumatic interaction between tendons and between bones. And we can see that here, okay? So this is an x-ray from a human with a heel spur, and you'll know that this is where the tendon attaches to the heel. And here you can see these bone spurs on a cow that is actually lame. And again, it's very similar to the situation in the human. This is where the tendon attaches to the back of that pedal bone. So it may well be something very important to consider in terms of why cows go lame in an aggressive environment. Okay, so yeah, this is just a picture of a healthy and a non-healthy pedal bone. So on the right here, we've got the healthy pedal bone. On the left, we've got the pedal bone with the osteophytes. Okay, and we talked about inflammation. And again, we know that inflammation in the claw for numerous reasons. So whether it be the presence of a sole lesion or something metabolic or an infectious claw lesion, this can potentially cause these osteophytes to develop. And again, very important to remember that this is an irreversible condition, which is going to result in this animal being consigned to a lifetime of lameness. And then the point I was making on the previous slide is, the tendons interact with these bones, and again, depending on how the animals are housed, the surfaces they're standing on, there could well be some interactions between bone and tendons, which might cause the development of these bone spurs. Okay, so I think we're just about out of time, and hopefully leave some time for some questions. So I just want to finish really by summarizing, how do we generate long-lived cows? Okay, so first of all, we need to think is, if we want to get these cows to work in the environment we put them in, or for the environment to be better for the cow is probably more correct. Then we need to remove those square edges. Okay, we need to round the edges of the square peg and make it more of an environment which is beneficial to the cow, and not just focus on the cow. Okay, we need to focus on the calf as well from a very young age, because what we know is that the way we manage those animals is going to influence the health of the claw in the long term. And if we can tackle lameness and reduce the incidence of lameness, then most definitely we're going to have longer lived cows, and we are going to keep more 100-ton cows in the herd, which is going to be very beneficial in terms of meeting that genetic potential of those animals and creating a more sustainable dairy industry. And with that, I'll open the floor to some questions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks so much, Huw. We do have a couple of questions, and if anyone does have questions, please type them into the Q&A panel, and we'll be sure to get to them. But first is a little bit more, I think, asking on your opinion and general recommendation, but which surface is best for aisles, concrete or rubber?
Yeah, so we did touch a little bit on that. So if we're talking about the aisles in between the stalls or at the feed passage, obviously the concrete is there from a management perspective because it's easy to manage. But I think most definitely in front of the feed bunk, there is a very good argument to have rubber, I think, because if you look at the time budget of the animal, then you can see that a lot of its time is actually spent, or the second longest period of its time is is spent in front of the feed bunk. So in those situations, I would recommend the rubber. But the most important thing to consider, of course, is the comfort of the stalls. Because if we haven't got comfortable stalls, then putting rubber in alleyways is not going to be a good solution. Okay, so we have to start with the stall. We have to get the substrate in the stall right. We have to get the design of the loop right. Then we have to get the cooling correct. And then we have to look at all the other things in terms of regular feed delivery, making sure feed is in front of the cows, making sure we're not overstocking. And then I think we can go to the next level and say, right, let's put rubber in front of this feeding area to protect a little bit more of the claws.
Is there a genetic element to medial claw rotation?
Well, that's a good question, right? And I think if you speak to a lot of people, they'll say, no, there's no genetic element to it. But then I go to farms and I've got dozens of pictures of animals in the same group, in the same environment. And the only thing that I can see different between the two groups of animals is actually the chest width. And what I see is those animals with a narrow chest width and splayed legs and narrow at the back as well, they tend to have more of these problems with rotation of claws. Okay, so I think possibly it's not the main driver, but it's certainly or possibly an element of the problem. And then obviously the environment tips it over the balance.
What thickness of cow mattress is needed, and how much should the rear hoof sink so that they stay when standing up?
Well, I think I think for me the only substrate that's going to provide enough sinking of the claw into the substrate is going to be a deep bedded system. Okay, so it's going to be over 10 centimeters deep of substrate. So whether it's manure solids or sand, you know, we need to be around about the 10 centimeters to allow that claw to actually penetrate into the surface. But of course, the other thing with that as well is the management of that substrate as well. Okay, so if the substrate has gone hard because it's becoming wet or it's becoming muddied and it's drying hard and it's not cultivated on a regular basis, then it's going to be no difference, right? So the claw is not going to sink in to that substrate anyway. And I know there are mattresses on the market that do allow or have a good depth of material which allows some sinking of that toe into the substrate. But again, I would take it on a case-by-case basis and go and look and make the decision for yourself. But certainly a mattress which allows the claw to sink in when the cow's end up is going to be advantageous.
Have you seen or do you have an opinion on asphalt use in dairy barns?
You know, it's one thing I haven't, to be honest, I've never seen it in any of the barns I've been to. But I'm thinking it's potentially softer or possibly less aggressive than concrete. But to be honest, I have no experience of it, so I can't really comment.
You made a good case on what we might consider the pasture conditions to be ideal for hoof health. I'm wondering what is the hoof problem occurrence on pastures and whether that would be a good target to use under confinement conditions.
Okay, good question. Yeah. So the problem with pasture systems is a lot of the issues we have with the claws is damage to the white lines. And a lot of this is to do again with environment, but also with management as well. So, for example, one of the big causes of lameness in grazing herds is the way the cows are actually, or how aggressively the cows are moved along the tracks. Okay, so I think there was a study done which showed that those herds which were moved more aggressively on the tracks, they had more hoof problems. And the other thing that differs greatly between the two systems is, of course, the conformation of the claw itself. Okay, so quite often you go to dairies where people have never seen animals which have been on a soft substrate, such as even in manure corrals, for example, yeah, or even on pasture. And the conformation of the claw is completely, on the underside, is completely different. Okay, so those animals which are on this softer substrate, they just tend to have a hoof wall with very little tissue between the hoof walls in the sole region. And then you look at the cows on the concrete, and the cows in the concrete have flat soles, and of course this is a consequence of this traumatic environment standing on the concrete, which stimulates the horn to grow. But I'm not sure how to, sorry, just repeat the question again. I think I've answered part of it, but yeah, what was the second part?
Wondering what is the hoof problem occurrence in pasture, yeah, and whether it would be a good target to use under confinement conditions.
Oh, okay, in terms of targets, yeah. Yeah, and I'd have to look, to be honest, because I'm not sure what sort of levels they do have in pasture systems. Yeah, it's not a number I've got to hand, to be honest, sorry.
Right, another question. Is there a difference in the amount of time the animals spend lying down on pasture versus on concrete?
Yeah, okay, so again, given the choice, the cows go out to pasture, and providing the availability of the pasture is good and the weather conditions are good, then the cows lie down for a long time, right? In the pasture system, the problem is if they have to, if the grass is not at the optimum condition for grazing, they have to spend longer for grazing because they have to consume a lot of fresh matter in order to achieve their dry matter intake. And of course, the other thing which is against them as well is daylight hours. Okay, so cows like to graze at dawn and dusk, and for example, if the day is short, then they're going to spend a lot of the time grazing and less time. Sorry, the other way around. Sorry. So they can have only a minimum time to graze, and then they may spend longer lying down. But the cows, if the grass availability is good, those cows are going to lie down for a long time, because obviously they go out in the morning, they graze, they fill up, and then they're going to lie down and rest for most of the day, because that is their natural behavior, to graze at dawn and dusk and then lie down in between and ruminate.
Thank you so much. That is all of the questions that we have. So with that, if you could go to the next slide, Huw, just before.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
I just want to invite everyone to join us for our next webinar, which will be on Friday, October 14th. It'll be with Dr. Don Niles. He works for Pagos Family Businesses, and he's going to really be talking about taking ownership of your own dairy story, and has a really unique perspective based on the Pagos family location and how they really came to be where they are today. So we invite you to register for that next presentation. And thank you again so much, Huw. We really appreciate your time and insights. And with that, we hope everyone has a really great weekend. Thank you.